Good afternoon and welcome to IBA News this 4th of September and 1st of Elul. I'm Elon Aslan-Levy, joining you live from Jerusalem. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu instructed cabinet ministers not to cause unnecessary problems over the ongoing dispute regarding work on rail lines during Shabbat. The dispute, which has provoked a cabinet crisis, has so far left hundreds of thousands of commuters in gridlock after the Tel Aviv-Haifa railway line was shut down till 7 tonight. This after the Prime Minister ordered the immediate cessation of 17 railway infrastructure works just before Shabbat. Some 150 trains were cancelled, affecting over 200,000 commuters at the start of the working week. The decision to suspend work was the result of the refusal of the United Torah Judaism Party to countenance any transportation infrastructure works on Shabbat and its threat to topple the government over the issue, following last week's commotion over upgrade works at Tel Aviv's Hashalom station. Parts of the track were left dismantled on Friday night after the last-minute instruction necessitating works during today's morning rush hour. To cope with the expected travel chaos, the government instructed the defense establishment to provide buses for soldiers, and Yesh Atid started an initiative to encourage members of the public to give soldiers a ride to base. Last night, the Prime Minister issued an unusually stern rebuke of the Transportation Minister Yisrael Katz, accusing him of generating an initiated and unnecessary crisis designed to undermine the relations between the Prime Minister and the ultra-Orthodox public, or else to damage the Prime Minister's public image. He maintained that there was never a need for work on Shabbat, but that the Transportation Minister was holding passengers and soldiers hostages in an unnecessary and artificial crisis that he initiated after having failed in his attempt to take over the Likud institutions. At this morning's cabinet meeting, the Prime Minister repeated his rebuke of the Transportation Minister, who was sitting right next to him, and reaffirmed that unnecessary infrastructure work will not be performed on Shabbat, in line with the religious status quo, although the Director General of the Transportation Ministry says upgrade works on Shabbat have been going on for years, and that the cancelled works already had the requisite permits from the government. While Katz has not responded, his associates accuse the Prime Minister of stoking the crisis as an excuse to fire a key rival. Now, media report that the Prime Minister made several phone calls to Likud ministers over Shabbat, seeking their support to fire Katz. Meanwhile, large rallies were held in Tel Aviv and Haifa last night, attended by opposition politicians who have gathered the necessary signatures for a special Knesset deliberation on the matter. Likud MK Yehuda Glick called on Netanyahu and Katz to reach agreement over the issue before it gets out of control. He told Israel Television's Oshri Elias that the issue needs to be resolved without violating the feelings of the religious community.
We're taking that Shabbat and turning it into an instrument of battle. It's so sad. I call upon all of the different parties, Prime Minister, Minister of Transportation, all the sides involved. Let's sit together, find a solution, how we can develop this beautiful modern Jewish country, at the same time leave it a modern country, developing country, and a Jewish state. It can be done if we have goodwill.
Here to discuss the Shabbat railway crisis is Gil Hoffman, senior political correspondent for the Jerusalem Post. Gil, welcome.
Pleasure.
Somebody here seems to be taking us for a ride. Was this crisis premeditated either by the Prime Minister or by the Transport Minister?
One or the other. And we're still trying to figure out who.
Go on, give me a hunch.
Netanyahu does not like Israel Katz. Netanyahu does not like it when any Likud figure amasses power and popularity under him. We've seen how they've all managed to find themselves out of politics. Gideon Sa'ar, Moshe Kachlon for a while. And it's happening again to Katz. But the latest news that I got immediately before coming here was that the meeting between Netanyahu's chief of staff, Yoav Horowitz, and Yisrael Katz went well, and so it's looking like he is not going to be sacked.
Does it look like Katz had an interest in provoking some sort of crisis or conflict with the Prime Minister?
He does have an interest in being in the headlines, and if he could be the savior of the secular community in Israel, that is helpful. But no, I don't think he had an interest in getting this out of control the way it has, and that Netanyahu is going too far.
There's a third option, which is that the United Torah Judaism Party stoked the crisis by demanding an end to infrastructure works that, according to the Transport Ministry, have been going on for years. Why the sudden crisis?
They didn't have to know about it. And basically, they were told by both sides about things that were going on every week. Netanyahu had this meeting
So for years, the Haredim weren't aware that work was going on the trains on Shabbat?
They were aware of it, but they weren't told.
Okay.
And here they were told in your face. The ultra-Orthodox media, after meeting with Netanyahu and asking him about it, and him being told, I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen, got out of control and put pressure on their elected officials, and that really made this crisis much worse.
So you feel they were put in a spot where they were pushed into a corner and they couldn't not react to the ongoing desecration of the Sabbath?
Right. Both the ultra-Orthodox media and Netanyahu and Katz all backed them into a corner that made them approve the desecration of the Sabbath, which they can't do with their constituents.
Okay, well, where do the other religious parties, Jewish Home, Shas, stand on the question of work on Shabbat?
The Jewish Home would like there to not be work on Shabbat, but Naftali Bennett was part of a meeting that approved it, whereas Uri Ariel, who was not part of that meeting, is strongly against it and has said that he will do everything possible to prevent it. Shas needs to be quiet right now because a lot of their constituency are traditional people who drive on Shabbat after they go to services at Shas-affiliated synagogues. So they have to try to find line.
And do you get the impression that United Torah Judaism would have really gone ahead and tried to topple the government if the Prime Minister hadn't buckled to their pressure?
Absolutely not.
So why did the Prime Minister give in?
The Prime Minister gave in because he was told by Yaakov Litzman that my rabbi, the Ger Rebbe, told me I cannot approve even a single act of Sabbath desecration. And then Netanyahu takes even flimsy threats quite seriously.
Okay. What about Israel Beitenu? Is there a chance it's going to stand its ground to fight for its secular voters?
No.
Why's that?
Avigdor Lieberman has his battles that he fights for. He fought for the Shevach Mofet school in Tel Aviv that has a lot of Russian immigrants who go there. This isn't his thing, and he's very, very happy being the Minister of Defense. He has a trip abroad coming up, and he's too busy to be the fighter for the secularists. I think the secularists are going to have to wait for Yair Lapid to come back for that.
Okay, well, briefly, let's have a look at some of the other opposition. Of course, they headlined the rallies yesterday in Tel Aviv and Haifa. Meretz chairwoman Zahava Galon petitioned the High Court to propose to support an injunction against the Prime Minister's order. Is the court likely to intervene in this case?
Also, no. They're going to let the government decide. By the time they get to court, there's going to be a decision. Katz worked on it today with Netanyahu's chief of staff. They're going to solve the problem. But by this coming weekend, there will be understandings reached to prevent this from happening, this kind of chaos, for the third weekend in a row.
Okay, well, if, as you say, the Prime Minister is not going to fire Katz in the end, where does that leave the relationship between them and Katz's not-so-secret prime ministerial ambitions?
Bad. They will not get along. They will continue to fight, which will make it interesting for political correspondence. Netanyahu has a trip to Holland coming up midweek. In the past, it's been Katz who has filled in for him as acting prime minister while he's abroad. Well, I don't expect him to be appointed to that. The other minister who in the past has been appointed has been Gilad Erdan, who will be in London. So now everyone's waiting to see this meaningless job of acting prime minister. Who's going to get that appointment?
Well, I'm sure if the crisis is being pushed, kicked into the long grass and returns again, we'll be happy to hear your thoughts in future. Gil, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
The Palestinian Authority says it is open in principle to a proposed meeting between President Mahmoud Abbas and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on condition that Israel fulfills several demands. That's according to Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki, who in an interview with the Ramallah-based Al-Ayyam Daily conditioned such a meeting on an Israeli commitment to freeze settlement activity and implement signed agreements. He stressed that the Palestinian leadership is not interested in holding a meeting that will not yield significant results. Such talks, he stressed, should not serve to bypass the French peace initiative for an international summit. Responding to the comments, the Prime Minister's office repeated the Premier's call to meet his Palestinian counterparts without preconditions. Minister of Science and Technology and Space, Ophir Akunis, is to convene representatives of the country's space industries for an emergency meeting over Thursday's dramatic destruction of the advanced Amos 6 communication satellite on a rocket launching pad in Florida. IBA's Aria O'Sullivan has this story.
Space is a tough business. It was to have been a very celebratory launch, but something went very wrong around 9 o'clock Thursday morning at the Cape Canaveral launch pad in Florida.
Breaking news.
We do begin with breaking news this morning, and it's out of Florida, where there's been an explosion at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station on a SpaceX launch pad.
The sophisticated Amos-6 communications satellite had been on the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket and was test firing its engines 48 hours ahead of launch when it blew up. The CEO of SpaceX tweeted that it really was a fast fire, not an explosion, but it certainly looked bad as it collapsed in flames. Built by Israel Aerospace Industries for the Israeli company Spacecom, it was to have been part of Facebook's internet plans to expand access around the world. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg had been very excited about the plan.
When people are connected, we can accomplish some pretty amazing things. We can get closer to the people that we care about. We can get access to new jobs and opportunities and ideas.
It took nearly 4 years to build Amos-6 and was considered one of the most advanced satellites for its size of just about 5.5 tons. It was to have replaced Amos-2, which is at the end of its lifespan. It was also to have supplied high-definition television to Europe and provide wideband communications to large swaths of Africa, which do not have telecommunications infrastructure. The Amos-6 was ferried to the United States a few weeks ago. It was to have a lifespan of 15 years, but alas met an untimely end. The $200 million satellite was insured, but it will take at least 3 years to build a replacement if and when that happens.
Amos-6 was the last order for a communication satellite from IAI for the moment. So even though we had a major setback with the explosion of the Falcon 9 rocket, it is now an opportunity for IAI to build a replacement satellite if the company Spacecom will decide to do it. Otherwise, it will most probably will be the end of the line of communication satellite in IAI, because we cannot compete with major manufacturers of satellites which produce much more satellites per year.
You know, this is a very small country, and we have the ability to make satellites and even put them into space, but is that something that maybe is beyond Israel?
No, absolutely no. It is within our capabilities, and I believe that there is a strategic need to do it, because space is a force multiplier, not only in defense, but also economically and education, in terms of education and innovation and so on. And we can do much more, but you have to remember that space is expensive, and from time to time there are malfunctions, and you have to cope with them. We are a small country with limited resources, but we managed to create a viable space program with a considerable fleet of operational satellites, and all our satellites in space are working very good.
Meanwhile, Spacecom shares dropped over 40%, and IAI said it would transfer to them $173 million it would collect in insurance. Ari O'Sullivan for IBA News.
Palestinians opened fire at an IDF force operating along the security fence between Israel and the northern Gaza Strip yesterday. No soldiers were injured. The troops fired back at a known Hamas position with a volley of shells. Palestinian sources reported that 3 Hamas operatives were injured in that exchange. A short time from now, the funeral of Herzl Shaul, the father of fallen IDF soldier Oron Shaul, whose body is being held by Hamas in Gaza, will take place at the Poria Elite Cemetery by the Kinneret. Herzl Shaul died Friday following a long battle with cancer before fulfilling his goal of repatriating his son's remains. The Shaul family has recently stepped up its public campaign to bring about the release of Oron's body. Relatives set up a tent outside the Prime Minister's Jerusalem home, calling on the government to secure the return. On Friday, IDF Chief of Staff Gadi Eisenkot paid tribute to Herzl Shaul, saying he had personally pledged to the bereaved father that he would keep pushing to return Oron Shaul's body home for burial, along with the body of Lieutenant Hadar Golden, who was also killed in Operation Protective Edge. Shaul's mother and 2 brothers expressed gratitude for the widespread support they received in recent weeks from thousands of Israelis who prayed for the father's health. They said that Herzl was greatly encouraged by the immense amount of love conveyed in his final days. Israel is reportedly planning to host a working group of the International Criminal Court as its prosecutor's office considers whether to launch an investigation into alleged war crimes in the 2014 Gaza war with Hamas. Under the Rome Statute, the court is able to open proceedings only if a relevant state proves unable or unwilling to pursue an investigation by itself. Speaking to French news agency AFP, an anonymous Israeli official said Israel had decided to cooperate with the request to admit the delegation in order to prove that the Israeli legal system is indeed capable of independent investigations. Last year, the Palestinians formally asked the ICC to investigate Israel for alleged war crimes, a process that Israel opposes. The Prime Minister's office declined to comment on the report. 73 Israelis were killed in the conflict, mostly soldiers. The Palestinians said that 2,251 people died in Gaza. Israel claims the majority of casualties on the Palestinian side were combatants and blames the civilian death toll on Hamas for deliberately placing rocket launchers, tunnels and other military installations among civilians, using them as human shields. In regional news, Turkey has announced plans to normalize relations with Egypt in the near future and even rebuild ties with Syria, where it has launched a cross-border offensive. In a televised briefing with ministers, Turkish Prime Minister Binali Yildirim said his country hopes to renew the ties just like it recently did with Israel and Russia, in order to enhance relationships and reduce enmities. Although he did not give an exact time frame for restoring ties with either of the Arab nations, Yildirim assured his cabinet that Ankara was making the necessary efforts to do so. Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump donned a talit yesterday on a visit to a non-denominational church in Detroit. The prayer shawl was a gift from Bishop Wayne T. Jackson, who told Trump that wearing the Israeli-made talit would be an anointing from God, which would lift him up when he feels forsaken. The churchman also gave the Republican nominee a Jewish Heritage Bible, which explores the Jewish roots of Christianity with annotations that cross-reference the Hebrew Bible to Christian scriptures. Many people expressed bewilderment on Twitter, some noting that the site is sure to rile Trump supporters on the alt-right. The time is ripe for Israel to become a Mediterranean maritime power, according to a new report of senior defense and diplomacy officials, co-sponsored by the Hudson Institute and Haifa University. With the increasing disintegration of Middle Eastern states and the advances of Russia and Iran in the region, the report argues that Israel should develop a comprehensive maritime strategy to protect its national security interests, discovering strategic depth by extending its naval reach. With America continuing to disengage from this region as it pivots to Asia, the authors claim that Israel must play a more proactive role in securing its naval trade and offshore energy reserves, as well as developing a regional energy strategy. It's time to raise your glass at the 13th Annual Jerusalem Wine Festival. The 4-day event opens tomorrow night at the Sculpture Gardens of the Israel Museum, where more than 40 vintners will be corking hundreds of the best wines the country has to offer. The 95 shekel entrance fee offers unlimited tastings, and festival goers get to keep their wine glasses as mementos. There's also a kosher dairy food stand available to keep for people to nibble, cheese, and of course chocolates. Some 20,000 visitors are expected to attend the Jerusalem Wine Festival at the Israel Museum tomorrow evening through Thursday night between 7 and 11 p.m, with doors opening Thursday at 6. L'chaim. It's Sunday, and if wine in Jerusalem is not enough, here are 5 good news stories that might just keep you in a good mood if you're stuck in traffic on the way home today. Israeli startup Renew Senses has developed the first ever so-called iCane, a small device that translates distance into sound and vibrations for the visually impaired. The group has also developed iMusic, which is able to translate color and shape into music. Soon you will be able to experience even more advanced computer software. Intel's Haifa office has developed its next-level processor, which promises to enhance internet speed and provide longer battery life and better security. You can even hear how thrilled they are. Tel Aviv voice analysis firm Beyond Verbal receives $300 million investment from China-based conglomerate. The company develops methods to analyze emotions based on vocal intonations. More homegrown innovation. Israeli startup Prospera has developed a method that uses in-field cameras and climatic sensors to help farmers better treat their crops. The company has raised $7 million in international funding. And finally, a joint regional project is in the making. Israeli scientists are reportedly working with counterparts from Pakistan, Egypt, Jordan, and Iran, yes, you heard that right, on a 100 million project to develop the Middle East's new particle accelerator being built northwest of Amman. In finance, the stock exchange is down and currency markets, not just the trains, are closed for the weekend. The weather this week will be warm with a slight rise in temperatures tomorrow, expected to remain stable throughout the week. And that's all for today. We leave you with footage of the IDF orchestra playing Hava Nagila at last week's International Military Music Festival in Moscow's Red Square.